not ready yet. I need more time.
If you're like me, then you're somewhere around 15 hours worth of gameplay into the Abattoir of Zir that's been newly added in Season 3 in Diablo 4. And let's just say this is absolutely the most challenging content that we've ever played in. Here's the problem, though. It's not that great. But I'm not just here to tear it apart. In fact, this video isn't even really about changes that I want to see in the Abattoir of Zir, because we're talking about the last month of this season. This thing is absolutely just a litmus test to see what this type of content really looks like in Diablo 4. And before anybody forgets, remember, we've all been crying that there's literally no challenging content in Diablo 4 to speak of. We've all been saying it. Once they nerfed Nightmare Dungeons and made it so that every build can run tier 100s, Uber Lilith was no longer a problem either. Everybody's just one-shotting it and literally world record speedrunning it across every single class. We had nothing to legitimately test our builds against. And in that way, I think that the Abattoir of Zir has actually succeeded incredibly well. But let's start off with the things I think Abattoir of Zir does incredibly well. The things that I hope I continue to see in whatever this content evolves into. Because remember, this is seasonal content. The glyph goes away, the content goes away. It's not meant to reward you with gear. It's not meant to give you some grand prize at the end. It's literally just to see how strong is your build in comparison to other builds. So the Abattoir of Zir is the first thing that's legitimately made me ask the question, can I possibly survive this? And not in the way that tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons did in the past, where you'll literally be using the aspect that says that you have a 5-second bubble of immunity just to have enough time to out DPS the elite monsters before you waited for cooldowns to reset and you moved on to the next group. That's not what I'm talking about. With the changes made to the various balance across the classes, how they've changed the damage buckets, how they've reoriented survivability stats, we're looking at a new game in Diablo 4 at this point, in comparison to what it was like at release, and absolutely in comparison to what it was like before the game released back in the betas. And with an overwhelming increase in player power, something that was a little bit hard to figure out when they were first nerfing the builds, and I did air quotes there, ultimately player characters have become incredibly strong in comparison to what they used to be able to do. Add on to that, we're talking about seasonal content, so we have the vampire powers, everybody has metamorphosis, we're all teleporting around, infinite unstoppable, literally haven't worried about a single crowd control effect the entirety of this season. And what that led up to is a general malaise amongst the player base. We really didn't have anything to sink our teeth into and to check our numbers and go, is this even good? If my build can speedrun Goa Ruins in a minute and a half or 2 minutes, is that really good in comparison to the other build that also speedruns Goa Ruins in 2 minutes? And that's where Abattoir of Zir stepped in. The excitement that I think a lot of us felt the moment that we walked into the first tier 1 and either got one tapped by an elite monster or got to the end with the Bloodseekers and found out that out DPSing them while trying to survive their damage was actually a really tall order. Let's use the myopic example of the Necromancer just for a quick comparison point here. Infinimist has felt incredibly well. I was easily moving through the tiers, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I got to tier 9. In comparison to that, a lot of people playing on what they probably thought was endgame gear Bone Spear setups literally couldn't do damage to the Seekers if they were vampiric, suppressor, or even worse, vampires and suppressors together. And what this led to is really interesting forms of theory crafting. Just today, and I'll try to go grab some footage of it so you have something to look at, I was messing around with a short spear Necromancer. What was the concept there? Literally taking the damage reduction to close and the damage reduction to shadowed targets that I have on my Infinimist Necromancer right now, and seeing if I could use that on Bone Spear, using things like Flicker Step and Lidless Wall for permanent uptime on Bone Storm, so even if there aren't a lot of monsters around, I can continuously maintain it. The idea here being if I could stand close enough to the Bloodseekers, then all of a sudden I could actually stack enough damage reduction to be able to survive them. And I could. Major issue being that I'm bad and I play on controller, so while I was able to best them a few times, I was still running into issues with Suppressor and Vampiric together. And that'll go into the list of things that I think are probably not great about what the Abattoir of Zir is bringing to the table, but let's try to focus, again, just on the things that I really like. But this change in how I approached building my character and how I thought about stats and how I evaluated them, as opposed to just using a bunch of rule of thumb concepts like, if it says DR max life and armor, it's probably good enough. No, all of a sudden I need to know the total armor amounts that I'm going to have to be able to max out my physical damage resistance. All of a sudden, having every single resistance capped means that I'm legitimately looking at my Book of the Dead as an alternative option for being able to stack elemental resistances, as opposed to just going for pure damage here. And then there's the Paragon boards, where I'm picking up poison resistance and total armor on nodes I've never pathed to before. All of a sudden, Sacrificial, which has always just been generally good, is make or break for how much total armor you could have. Literally min-maxing whether or not you're taking individual nodes of all resistance. If you're just slightly over cap, being able to reclaim these points and move them to somewhere else on your board to be able to gain better and bigger damage outcomes. This is cool. This is like interesting theory crafting. This isn't just follow a build guide and try it out. You have to individually change stats based off the exact gear that you have, because the armor that I have on my character isn't going to be the armor that you have on your character. The Abattoir of Zir is making you legitimately look at your gear and ask the questions that you've never asked before. Can I, as a Necromancer, actually afford to run 3 DR stats on my amulet, foregoing mobility, and just literally need to play better and faster to be able to make up for the difference in movement speed? Something that I never thought I was going to take off my amulet ever. Here's kind of the problem. That's the end of the list of the things I think Abattoir Zir is currently excelling at or doing well or bringing to the table as far as challenge content for Diablo 4. And I'm going to start off with probably the easiest thing for everybody to kind of like chew down on or to understand. And it is the grind of the glyph, the Tears of Blood. Now, just very quickly, let's look at my character. Obviously, attack power doesn't really matter, but no elixirs, nothing else on. I'm sitting at close to 30,000 attack power, 13,700 armor, so I'm basically at the armor cap for tier 25 Abattoir of Zir as we stand right now, and that's without disobedience going. 17,000 life, the ability to generate infinite barrier via Lidless Wall and Flicker Storm and Bone Storm, here with Shielding Storm. I'm using Blight Pulse for even more survivability and crowd control. I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different uniques, all with near perfect rolls on them, and very fine-tuned stats across the rest of my gear to have the specific things that I need. This is a very powerful Corpse Explosion build. This is an incredibly powerful character as far as gear is concerned. I also have a Shaco, a Doombringer. I can go put those on as well. I have a Tybalt's Will with perfect rolls on it, and I've been swapping them out continuously. So the only thing that I legitimately have right now as far as adding power onto my build, leveling it up is absolutely atrocious. Running tier 1 Abattoir of Zir gives you 1,000 experience. That means that I need to run 24 tier 1 dungeons to be able to level this up to the next level. Each one of these is taking me about 3 minutes, right? So that's not too bad. You know, let's call it 75 minutes. Let's call it an hour and 15 minutes just to level this up. That's not terrible. Here's the problem though. Even with all my gear and everything that I have set up, sometimes I still just get popped on Abattoir of Zir tier 1. Sometimes the Seekers come out, they don't get crowd controlled, one of them teleports away from me, throws a single missile, and then all of a sudden I'm dead. For whatever reason, I can't figure it out. Sometimes they just one-tap you. So I have to go very meticulously slow, meaning that before I get to them, I have to make sure that all my cooldowns are up, so that as they're spawning in, I can pop Bone Storm and then pop Blood Mist, which will generate the corpse, so my corpse tendrils for my ring will auto-proc, and then they'll all be crowd controlled, and then I can burst them down. And sometimes it just doesn't work like that. If I'm at my gear level and my ability to clear tier 10s, am sometimes dying in tier 1s, this isn't just run it 24 times for another level. It's maybe run it 24 times, maybe run it 30 times. Then you'll get one more level. And I'll let you know that when I was running tier 10, I had a level 5 glyph. I've leveled it up twice now, and I still can't run a tier 10 and actually just complete it straight out without using a shrine. I just can't do that consistently, depending on what the affix is that the Bloodseekers have. Now that was a really long walk just to complain about the grind. And the issue with the grind is that the glyph experience is not representative of the difficulty in increasing tiers. So if I were to speedrun tier 5s, which I could pretty comfortably do, if I'm willing to play very hard and make sure I make no mistakes during any of it and avoid all ground damage, which again is just like randomly one-shotting me, even though it doesn't always one-shot me. Feels like something is weird with ground damage and maybe DR not working with it again, or maybe it's stacking again. There's something to it. At least there's enough complaints in my chat when they see me inevitably die to one that I couldn't avoid, that something's coming up. But let's talk about the actual glyph itself. Obviously the glyph is incredibly powerful. We don't have any other glyphs that say gain a 93% damage multiplier. Problem being that the amount that you have to invest in the glyph to be able to get this many stats out of it makes it so that you really can't afford to find more damage elsewhere. And the amount of survivability that you have to stack on your character to be able to actually live through the Bloodseekers, if you can live through the Bloodseekers, also significantly hampers your ability to find damage elsewhere. Here's my minimum glyph for darkness. Here is my slightly higher maxed out glyph for Scourge. Here's my minimum glyph for control. Here's my minimum glyph or sacrificial. And while that's kind of cool, right, doing all these like little minimum optimizations, it just means that you really can't afford to build anywhere else into the board. So here's my first recommendation. And this is something that I actually put out on Joe Shelley actually responded to me. I'll like show that tweet right here. But the first thing that I would love to see if and when this content comes out at a different time in a different shape with a similar but slightly different system is the amount of investment into literally how many points the glyph takes to be vastly reduced. Right here, this says all core stats. If this just said all main stat with the exact same scaling, you'd be able to pull out a massive amount of points here and at least go get one more glyph. That one more glyph could be an additional 10% damage reduction. That one more glyph could be another 100 additive damage, maybe another 10% damage multiplier. That one more glyph would allow us to transfer more power back onto the character and away from the investment into this glyph. And even when it increases in radius, the amount that you would have to invest in it again would not be nearly as hampering as it's going to be, because I'm going to have to go pick up all of these extra nodes all the way around here. Nodes that, other than empowering the glyph, do almost nothing for my build. While the intelligence is nice, the willpower is literally useless. The strength is actually kind of interesting, except for the fact that I'm already at the armor cap, so like I wouldn't need that moving forward. And I don't need the dex because I'm not a dex build, so I'm just investing into a bunch of dead points for something that just seems like it could be rather simplified. Message 2. The grind for the glyph literally just needs to be made easier. The amount of hours that I've seen people calculate if I were to just spam tier 1s, the most consistent output of glyph experience that you can do on builds that cannot easily clear tier 10s or lower is an insane amount of hours, like 100 plus hours, to get to rank 50. This isn't even to get it all the way up to rank 200, right? And it's okay if there's a grind in this system. There should be a grind in this system, especially if it's going to be added in at the beginning of a season or as a new, just evergreen system that's just in the game permanently. It's fine if there's a grind, but the grind as it stands right now is not really allowing us to actually explore the system and what its capabilities are. I'm almost certainly never going to get this thing to level 50 in the rest of this season. And I professionally play this video game every day for at least 6 hours every day. So I don't know what other people's opportunities are for being able to do this, but I don't think we're going to get there. So make the scaling for leveling the glyph or whatever the thing is, the thing that we invest gold into or whatever it is, the sink, make it less incredibly tiresome. So at least at the very much, if people are interested in grinding it, they're getting something out of it. And that brings it up to the next part of the discussion, which is you don't get anything for doing Abattoir of Zir. Looking at my inventory, I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've run Abattoir of Zir 5 times in the past hour or so while I've been chit-chatting, and I've gotten some items. And to their credit, the items are minimum item power level 900, which is pretty cool. Now, sadly, we've been inundated with 925 from Duriel and world bosses for the entirety of the season. The items that drop at the end, which you don't have to pick up the entire time, a great option. I think that is a fantastic implementation, aren't enough of a carrot for me to be okay with grinding out the glyph just to hopefully level it up, just to hopefully be able to run a single tier higher in the Abattoir of Zir, since there's nothing after that. After that is another grind for me to level up my glyph to the next level, hoping that gives me enough damage on my build to be able to run the next tier, etc., etc. If I need to put in hours upon hours upon hours just to be able to run my glyph level up 1 rank, to then spend a ton of sigil dust on like 5, 10, maybe 20 attempts before I clear the next tier, it's a system which does not have enough carrots on enough sticks, and is literally draining me of spending time playing the game for fun to accomplish a thing that's realistically nobody is really proud of it. So that's the next thing. It needs to have something more going for it. If I was getting an insane amount of gold at the end, if I was getting materials at the end, if I was getting a ton of crafting mats or summoning mats, something else, there needs to be a thing tied to this other than just like pure ego, especially with like no leaderboards. Now, obviously leaderboards are coming in season 3. for different content. Heck, this might even be a litmus test for something like that. But there's gotta be something else, boys, because this isn't really working for the majority of people. And I'm interested in the challenge. I'm interested in the grind. A lot of people aren't. Now, I talked a lot about the chance to be able to complete the dungeon. And you might go, well, what do you mean a chance? If you've built your character right and you've really like assessed the various threats that are coming, what do you mean the chance to accomplish it? Well, there's shrines in this content. And those shrines, at least from like tier 10 to about tier 15, invalidate the entirety of the content. And I mean invalidate. I mean like completely make it so that your build doesn't matter, the content doesn't matter. All you need to put on is 1,000 damage reduction, get a blast wave shrine, and then you will complete the dungeon. You will kill the Bloodseekers.
I'm not ready yet. I need more time.
Now, that won't continue to scale, right? Like that's not going to work in tier 25, but at least like 10 to 15, I'm getting reports like, oh, I cleared a 15. I got there. I managed to get there at the end, but I had to shrine hunt. Oh, I cleared a whatever, but I had to shrine hunt. Oh, I did this, but I had to shrine hunt. Shrine hunting or pylon hunting or fishing in Diablo 3 Greater Rifts might have been very fun for people who played that. I can't speak to that. I did not play Greater Rifts in Diablo 3 to the point where I actually had to like fish for shrines. I can tell you in Diablo 4, I hate it. I've actually just specifically been not using any of the shrines, not as a weird ego boost, not as like a, oh, I'll prove to them that you don't need them. No, if my build can't run the tier of dungeon that I'm currently doing, then my build isn't strong enough to do it. And any shrines that I find along the way aren't going to give me a way of like better interacting with my character build, better theory crafting, coming up with new ideas. If it's just keep running these dungeons and wasting sigil dust until I find a blast wave shrine, go to the boss, and then become permanently immune with multiple systems until they're dead, that's not a build. That's not my character. I haven't accomplished something. I didn't do anything. All I got was slightly more sigil powder, slightly more glyph experience, and then I can't go replicate that feat without fishing again. It's just lame. Like, it's just not cool. I would rather shrines literally not be in the content, and then the content be scaled to accommodate that. If the content is meant to be very spiky or have weird RNG because shrines are there, I just don't agree with that. I would much rather the content be doable without them, and then builds that use items like Barbarian have a cool leg up, something that they can tap into because they can itemize in that way. And if it turns out that's too strong, that's fine. You know, rebalance it, do whatever you need to do. But I don't think that there should really be RNG factors in a system that is this hard to complete, requires this level of gear, requires this level of investment of time, just for it to be impossible unless the stars line up. Because again, that's not really a mark of my build. A leaderboard won't matter if it's just RNG. That's just not really content that matters to players, or at the very least, in my humble opinion, content that matters to players that I would enjoy. And lastly, the last thing that I'll tear apart here, because I'm getting a bit long in the tooth, is the Bloodseekers themselves. Super cool. I love that there were 3 bosses. I love that they're actually elite monsters, which means that you can't really interact with them in the same way that you would with regular bosses. But because they're so hard to kill, you can use things like explorers because they're going to become unstoppable after you hard CC them for long enough, and you can get a damage bonus for doing that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can interact with them because they're not bosses, but they are elite monsters. And unironically, I think that was super cool. I loved seeing it when Filthy Rich first demoed the gameplay, and I thought that this was a phenomenal way of making the challenge at the end of the dungeon very cool, because they're going to be using attacks that normal monsters can't typically use. And then that was kind of the end of the line as far as like good things about them. They roll with 3 elite affixes. each one of them having 3 elite affixes. And the amount of times that all 3 of them rolled vampirism, making it literally impossible for me to outplay them, because one of them will inevitably hit me with one of their attacks full healing themselves after I fought them for a minute plus without a shrine, multiple times. Oh, we have vampiric, rip.
I need more essence. I need more time.
Can we all be on top of each other, please? Thank you.
I'm out of potions.
All right, we got...
I lack the required essence. I do not have any potions.
We have 1 dead. We have 2 dead. All right, now I just need to not let this dude hit me. Easier said than done.
I'm not ready yet. I need more time.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I've run out of essence. I hope I can find a clip of that because it was just like wildly frustrating. I actually just ran out of essence on the last one and just couldn't kill him, and also ran out of corpses. So vampirism, just gotta get rid of that. Whatever monsters we end up fighting, like literally should not have a vampirism ability. I know that there's a tell, like they become glowing red and whatever, except they're all blood seekers, so they're all red already. And then on top of that, I've actually turned off all in-game damage numbers and status numbers, because on top of them all having their own AoE abilities that they drop on the ground, and me having my own AoE abilities on the ground, since there's 9 total affixes, there are mortar shells going off, there are fire enchanted explosions going off, there are shock lances going around, there are lightning enchanted balls everywhere, trying to tell me to see the red indicator for the thing that's about to completely invalidate a minute of damage that I just dealt is honestly laughable. It is bananas how hard it is to see stuff in the middle of combat with monsters that will one-shot me unless I am playing perfectly. So vampirism, just gotta get that one out of there. That one just ain't cool. It's not cool to invalidate progression or damage that a player has done in challenge content against a boss. It's just like, it's never going to feel good. There are other ones. I think most notably, a lot of people are probably going to be complaining about Suppressor.
I need more time.
Can I have a corpse here? That would be super cool. Damn, dude. And I agree. Suppressor is really, really, really rough to deal with. Absolutely no question. I'm going to speak from the side of the argument of melee characters, or characters who have to fight in close range, get bent a little bit. Sorry. I know that that's mean. No, I don't think that it's wrong for some of them to have affixes which are going to make it so that range characters need to approach combat in a different way than they typically do to benefit from all of the great parts about being able to kill things from off screen. If you need to get in and get dirty, it means you have to change up your gear. I actually like that. I think that that is cool. I just think as it stands right now, Suppressor in the game as it stands is just too punishing. The inability of all walls in the game to be held accountable for actually being able to reflect projectiles. The amount of times that my projectiles are just eaten by things in the world that it should reflect off of. I don't want to do it with Conduit. What's the point of doing it with Conduit? I already know I can do it with Conduit. Oh, you mean just sit there, I guess? All right, so we do have Suppressor here, which is kind of exactly the thing that we're looking to test against, right?
Yes. And then this is, yeah, and then you stand on the other side ideally to use the wall.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sadly,
And
controller is a little bit rough here.
controller is rough. I think so too. Yeah. And now unstoppable. And
Oh!
now you would.
Oh. I think that the issues with Suppressor right now are actually just symptoms of the game not actually fully responding to appropriate projectile movement and is overly punishing. And because of that, Suppressor is overly punishing as well. So if the game was perfect, where every single thing that I shot my Bone Spear up against properly reflected the Bone Shards back, Suppressor wouldn't be too bad. Make the radius a little bit bigger, give it maybe a little bit of uptime or downtime. I know if you hard CC them, the Suppressor will drop for a little bit, but they become unstoppable. So there's just nothing you can do after the 6 seconds of hard CC, and then you're just screwed the entire time. And then lastly, maybe just no repeats of affixes. I think the 3 overlapping fire enchanted explosions that my build cannot physically output enough sustain against was probably a bit overkill.
I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. I need more time.
Oh, probably a little bit too strong. I also really hate 3 shock lances and 3 lightning enchanteds. Those are all heinously rough. And then on top of that, when you just have like fear and cold enchanted and another like on death effect like poison enchanted or plague bearer, so all of a sudden the area that I have to fight them in becomes completely hostile to me. But the moment that I leave, I lose my damage reduction from close and then I'm dead. I can't account for all of the different damage types that they do. Half of them teleport, the other ones leap away. It's not really challenging. It is an amount of consideration and brain power that I just don't think the average player or even the hardcore player can legitimately muster at any given moment, considering it's completely random. So if we could at least expect to see a diversification of the additional affixes that bosses were to have, we could know that I will only ever have to deal with one source of this thing or this possible combination, as opposed to 1 Waller, 1 Suppressor, triple Vampiric, triple Fire Enchanted. Like the combinations that it gets up to are really, really heinous. And then I guess that's my last thing too. If the combat cannot be done with the default settings on that include showing damage numbers and showing status effects, because they cover so much of the screen that's physically impossible for me to actually see the various effects that the monsters have, one of these systems isn't working. Right? If the default settings of the game need to be changed for somebody to have a chance to be able to meet the challenge and actually succeed, this is probably a problem. I don't really know what you can do with that. It's just a pain point that I've experienced, and I've never turned off damage numbers in any other content. Not Echo of Lilith, not back when tier 100s were super over strong and super overtuned. I've never turned them off, but here I literally have to, because the amount of on death effects and on ground AoE effects that just kind of pop off underneath me is really, really heinous. Now I'm still a Shadow Necromancer, so obviously I make big corpse explosions down on top of me. I have a lot of overlapping things myself, but there's something wrong with the game when the base experience doesn't allow you to master the base experience. So you might be thinking, what am I doing with the Abattoirs here? Well, I'm grinding because I do want to see what the full potential of all the different builds are. I do believe that there's a value in being able to theorycraft with these challenges in mind, especially if this is some kind of test for content that is to come. I'd like to be able to excel at it. I'd like to be able to get that leg up. I'm not going to throw away the opportunity to test out something, but it's incredibly frustrating. I'm speedrunning tier 1s, something that just isn't fun. And sometimes I'm dying during them, which is just like really hard to do when you got a bunch of people watching you, expecting you to do well at the game, and you kind of just get popped because a particular combination of things happen. But I'm willing to tough my way through it just to see what it kind of looks like. If I get up to a rank tier glyph, does all of a sudden my damage problems go away and I can focus on survivability? Who knows? I'm at least going to use this opportunity to basically PTR whatever this content looks like. You know, we're always asking for PTRs. Here's your PTR, right? What I would beg people to do, and again, I'm just going to show you the example of when Joe Shelley responded back out to me on Twitter, because I basically wrote up a little snippet of what I covered here in this video, and he responded well to it. But here's what I recommend. I truly don't believe that enough people understand that if you write up your criticism in a well-worded way and put it out onto social media, whether it's on the Blizzard forums themselves, out on X, Twitter, who's calling it X? It's Twitter. Out on Twitter, even if you're just posting in different Discords and it gets bubbled up to various content creators or Diablo partners and they communicate it to the devs, I promise you, we also have struggles with this. We are also frustrated. We are also discussing these things with the developers and sending back our notes and sending in videos where we think this thing isn't working well or this thing isn't working well. Put together a list of things that you either really like, really hate, would like to see changed, or are hoping this will evolve into. Put it together, throw it up on Reddit, throw it up on Twitter. If it's well worded, ping me. I'll go ahead and just like increase your signal. I think that there's a really good opportunity here for us to be on the ground floor and hit the ground running as far as implementing good feedback for this system. Because if it ever makes its way back into the game, I don't want people to be struggling like they currently are. I don't want to hear the frustrations I'm currently seeing in chat of people being like, unironically, this is something that I heard today. Well, I ran out of dust and I got one shot and I'm not about to go grind. So I'll see you in season 3. That sucks. Let's just say that person was already going to peter out. Maybe they were only going to play for a couple days, maybe just one more week into the season. That's a week of gameplay that person doesn't get to enjoy now because they feel like they've been beaten over the head with something that they're not meant to play. And it's in a game that they bought. But put together your feedback, put together your critiques, get all of that into like a really nice little well-written thing and put it out there. I promise you, people are listening. The devs listen. The Diablo 4 devs are head and shoulders above the rest of the game as far as taking in actual feedback, asking for it, and then using it to implement changes into the game that have ultimately been to the benefit of us all. So I would recommend doing that as opposed to, I don't know, like just like screaming into the abyss and just saying like incompetency and, terrible things about people. But let me know what you think down in the comments. I'd love to hear from your experience. Heck, if you're not on the Necromancer and you're on one of the builds that gets to actually push into the tiers, what's the highest tier that you've pushed? What are the secrets that you've been cooking up? What things do you think are working well or people aren't necessarily exploring? They're really giving you a leg up. I'd really love to hear from you. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it helped to give some form to any frustrations you might have had, or at the very least educated you or entertained you at the very least. And as always, thank you for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.